Would you like the right to carry a gun in your daily life? It happens in many states in the United States, and legal gun owners in this country say, hey, regardless of what we want, we're being attacked right now by the Trudeau Liberals. Case in point, Bill Blair, who is the former police chief of Toronto, by the way, he's now the Minister of Border Security and Organized Crime Reduction. He now says that he will conclude his consultations on a handgun ban that everyone seems to be calling for, or not everybody, but a lot of powerful people in this country are, by the end of 2018. He says he wants to stop gang members from getting their hands on firearms that were initially purchased legally. That was a headline a couple months ago. Remember when they said the number was something like 50% of all guns in the hands of criminals were purchased by legal gun owners initially, which I know my next guest will object to in terms of that stat in just a second. But I also want to talk about the fact that why would you want to make the case to carry a gun in a city like Montreal, for example? Rod Giltaca is CEO of Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. Morning, Rod. Welcome back. Thanks for your time.
Good morning, Leslie.
I think there's a geographical factor in this. You're in Alberta. Did you grow up around guns?
In British Columbia, actually just outside of Vancouver. No, I didn't. I never shot a gun in my life or saw a gun until my mid-30s.
So what is it about guns that attracted you, and why is it you took on the CEO position for obviously a group that wants to relax and allow legal gun owners more rights?
Well, it's interesting. I had no interest in firearms whatsoever.
Yeah.
I was exposed to firearms through work in business development. I worked with the U.S. military, just in some supply stuff.
Got it.
And being a Canadian that never grew up with it, I just never had an idea why you would ever need a gun. And so I was actually quite prejudiced against the U.S. attitude about firearms. And through a lot of very rational and reasonable discussions, I got interested in firearms. I had the opportunity to shoot a few, and I thought, this is interesting. I'm not a bad person. How come I can't have a gun?
And why do you want a gun? I mean, that's the question. You see, I'll tell you, I started like you. My parents wouldn't allow guns in our house. As kids, we weren't even allowed toy guns. So you can see where I come from here. So why would you even want a gun? Do you want to carry it in your day-to-day life?
Well, concealed carry is not something that our group is actively advocating. Actually, if you go to our website, we do have a policy on it because we're very overt about how we feel about different issues.
Right. So you're open to it, but you're not advocating at this point.
Yeah, no, it's not something that we're actively pushing. No.
Fair enough. But you would ideally, in a perfect world, and there's a lot of hoops to jump through until we get there, you would like to be able to do what they do in Texas, for example.
Well, interestingly enough, if you do want to talk about this topic in particular, our position on concealed carry is never has there been any evidence to show that people that hold a concealed carry license in the United States have been a problem for crime. Like that has never been shown ever. And it's the evidence on that is compelling.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is we see something that has been a benefit to society, and there have been a lot of instances where concealed carry holders in the United States have stopped crime and saved lives, because guns can save lives too. I think people forget that. But what we haven't detailed, and this is the reason why we're not actively engaged in this argument, is we haven't detailed what the criteria for somebody that would be able to be equivalent to the police and carry a firearm for protection. So
what does that mean? What does that mean? You want better screening before that happens? Put it in layman's terms.
Well, I mean, we're not advocating that everybody that is over the age of 19 in Canada should strap on a gun and walk around with it.
So who should? I get it. But who should be allowed to?
Well, we have people in our society that are allowed to, like the police, and they have to go through a certain amount of screening, and they have to have a certain level of training, including the lawful use of that gun, should they have to do it. So
don't we already have that in our country?
We do, but I think it's become very obvious that those resources are limited and are not fitting. They're not achieving the response to the amount of crime that we do have.
Here's the elephant in the room. Every day, and I've been doing this for a long time, and it's been increasing, we see incidents where people go into workplace with guns. We see incidents of people on the side streets. We see drive-by shootings. The percentage is a lot higher in the United States than here is in Canada. The rules are very different. How is that not a factor into the more you give people access to guns, how do you make sure you don't have what they have down south?
So the concept that you're describing is availability of firearms equaling gun violence. And the problem with that argument is that the results are inconsistent. And so you have some countries or some jurisdictions that have very loose gun laws. and they have very low instances of firearm-related violence. You have jurisdictions with very high amount of gun regulation, and they have high violence. And then you also see the opposite. So there's really, and despite what some people say, the devil's always in the details. And I think that anybody that wants to talk about this, if you really want to be informed, you have to do a lot of reading, and you have to have an open mind, and you have to be honest. So
it's just hard to get past all the news headlines and all the the people who go postal. I hate the expression, but you know how it came out of people because of the laws the way they are.
Well, no, I don't agree with that. But certainly I would agree with it's hard to get past the headlines. So going back, I think if we're ever going to solve this issue and have a mature discussion and come up with solutions, we have to be honest. And the lack of honesty in this conversation is what has held us back for this entire time from solving this problem, one way or the other, whether it's my way or the anti-gun way.
So who's lying? Who's lying to us?
Bill Blair is lying to us, and Mark Saunders, the chief of police, is lying to us, the chief of police of Toronto. Yeah, and we've seen that because...
How so? What are they saying? What are they saying that they're lies?
The chief of police is a great example. He said there has been a dramatic surge in domestically sourced firearms that turn into crime guns.
Right, that was the 50% number, yeah.
Well, yeah, and it was floated over 50% by Goodale originally to support actual legislation. And then through ATIPs, we find that the opposite was true. So in the case of Toronto, they've actually, they're at the lowest level of domestically sourced crime guns in 4 years. It's been in decline, and in fact, they can't even prove that it's 9%, because even in the 9% that they actually had, and they had these numbers the whole time, they included toy guns, air guns, starter pistols, replicas, all classifying them as firearms. So I'm not saying that there's not a problem with guns, because gun owners want a safer Canada too. I don't like the gun violence. I hate it, especially being blamed for it as a regular Canadian.
Yeah,
but we're never going to get to the bottom of this, Leslie, until we are honest with each other, and that's what our group is pushing for.
One of the reasons why Bill Blair got this position is because he was the Toronto police chief for so long and went on into politics, and now he's the minister overseeing this. And I think as a police officer and a police chief, he would be pretty, in favor of doing the right thing for the people he had to protect. And by what he thinks is the right thing is doing the opposite of what you see. So I guess the question is, what's in it for Bill Blair?
Well, I think Bill Blair, who's now a politician, is saying whatever he has to say to push his agenda forward. And I think,
what's his agenda? Sorry, what's his agenda?
Well, the agenda, and just based on evidence.
Yeah.
I mean, and the Liberal Party as a majority government right now, their agenda is that nobody gets guns but them. And people like me can't be trusted. I don't get a gun, no matter what, whether I do anything bad or anything good, or I follow the rules. It doesn't matter. You don't get guns. Only we get guns. And it's funny because for the longest time they said, we don't want your guns, conspiracy theorists. And now it's like, oh yeah, we want to ban all your guns and take your guns. And it's the double speak and the lying to justify legislation. It's almost like people think that's acceptable behavior. And maybe I'm the only person in the room that don't think.
No, there are a lot of people who agree with you that there's doublespeak all the time for politicians, and it's not only on this issue. I've got less than a minute left, so my last question for you is: what is wrong with a handgun ban as being pitched by the mayor of Toronto and ultimately being looked at by Bill Blair and the Trudeau government?
Well, there's a variety of reasons, but probably the most compelling is handguns are already banned. You can't legally possess a handgun without a license. In fact, you're getting a criminal record check every day as long as you hold that license. So you have the most vetted, most scrutinized and monitored Canadians are only allowed to have handguns. And if you are in unauthorized possession, is what we call it legally, of a handgun, and let's say you committed a crime with it, you're literally looking at decades in prison. But I don't see criminals getting even years in prison a lot of times. So we got other problems that need to be solved besides kicking my door and taking my guns. Yeah,
no, I agree with you on that last part. Law and order and the crackdown on gun crimes has to come. I'm not going to agree. I'm not convinced yet. We'll have to agree to disagree on the other issues, because this is I go back to what I see down south. I see the laws of the land. I see the laws are very different here, and the crime is a lot less. On that point,
but we're not in the States, so it's a little bit different. But definitely we need to have another conversation.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you coming on as always, being candid, honest, upfront, and we're representing your position accordingly as CEO of Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. Appreciate it. Thanks, Rod.
Anytime, Leslie.